Hi guys, welcome back to another episode on Rancor Reptiles. I'm here with you with another herb talk. If you like these talks, please leave a like, subscribe, comment down below. Let me know how I'm doing, maybe even leave a suggestion for next video's theme. And today's theme, we're going to be talking about the most rudimentary thing you can have in your setup. The rock bottom, the pay dirt, the substrate. Substrate, I think, is overlooked a lot in a lot of different enclosures simply because it is the thing that everything sits in. However, I think it's one of the most important things in your setup because it's the thing that everything sits in. Now, of course, there's different animals come from different habitats, different environments, so obviously there's going to be different types of substrates, and different types of substrates you should be having to pay attention to. Now, the most basic of these substrates that is used is paper towel. Paper towel is probably one of the most used substrates because it is sterile, it's clean. If it's dirty, it's pretty easy to replace, right? It's very cheap as well, and it definitely has its place. For example, in baby geckos or other small reptiles and amphibians, paper towel is great because it really can retain humidity in not so well ventilated enclosure, right? If you have like a baby gecko or a baby frog and you have it in some Tupperware that has some holes poked into it on some wet paper towel, the paper towel won't dry out immediately, so it's very nice. However, like I said, it's sterile. It really doesn't provide anything for the animal, and there's better alternatives, which I'm gonna get into. Alright, so one of these alternatives is sand. Sand is probably one of the substrates with the most contention, the most controversy, because sand has and will impact your animals if not properly used. Now, there's been a lot more people with experience, and more articles written about sand, and there's certain things to stay away from, right? There's certain types of sand that have a very they're coarse, they're microscopically coarse. They have like sharp, jagged edges that helps them bunch up together easier. So if an animal ingests a large amount of this type of sand, they get impacted, which basically means that sand clumps up in their intestines and doesn't let anything pass through. That has been the biggest fear of, and people, that's why most people stay away from sand. However, people now with experience have kind of figured out that it's certain sands are okay and certain sands are not. There's a particular types of sand called calcium sand. Basically, sand that has calcium in it is particularly bad because animals tasting that this sand has calcium, they tend to lap it up and ingest a large portions of this calcium sand, and that is grounds for impaction. So it's very important you stay away from calcium sand. However, there's other types of sand that are have softer microscopic edges around the grain that really don't stick together very well. Those type of sands are okay with certain types of species of animals, and of course you can always mix different things into the sand to make sure that that your animal, if they do take a bite out of it when they're chasing around their prey, they don't just ingest sand. Maybe you can mix it up with like other types of mosses and stuff. Now, of course, if you have an animal like a Kenyan sand boa, it's important that instead of laying down your wet rat or prey animal onto the sand, to maybe place it on top of a tray. That way your Kenyan sand boa won't, get a mouthful of sand with the animal it's eating. It's just better for overall health. I would personally stay away from sand. However, if the animal you have does very well with it, then I would say you should shoot for it and gain some experience out of it. Now, the next type of substrate on the list is Aspen. I particularly don't like aspen because I carry more tropical, higher humidity animals. Besides the viper geckos, those guys like it a little bit drier and hotter. Ball pythons really don't like aspen because they like higher humidity. Higher humidity really disagrees with aspen because it's basically dried wood shavings. Higher humidity causes aspen to mold over. However, if you have a particular animal that likes lower humidity, like a Kenyan sand boa, or let's say Kenyan sand boa, maybe other types of burrowing snakes, I think aspen would be a great alternative to sand. This type aspen, it loosely holds together okay. So burrowing snakes like Kenyan sand boas and other types of burrowers can use aspen fairly well. And so that might be a good alternative to have in case you don't want to use sand or you don't have a suitable types of sand available to you, right? The next type of substrate on the list is Cypress mulch. Now, Cypress mulch is a really good mulch. It's a very type of wood chip for tropical for tropical uses. They're used frequently with tropical tortoises. However, they're often mixed with sands and other types of mosses to produce like this and coconut coir to produce like this tropical mix that is used in planted terrariums. However, Cypress mulch I think is good baseline bedding for things like ball pythons or other types of reptiles that like it a little more humid. So I think that's a great substitute for a great substitute to have in case you just don't want to use paper towels anymore. Since the chip is around medium to small sized, they really don't get caught up in an animal's mouth when they're eating. So I think it's a great alternative. Next up is coconut coir. Coconut coir. There's two different types of coconut substrates you can buy and are frequent on the market: coconut coir and coconut chip. Coconut coir is a very powdery, wiry at times substrate. Coconut chip is like chipped husk of the coconut. Coconut coir is sometimes used for bedding. However, I would really recommend using coconut coir to mix into with other substrates to produce a really nice tropical substrate. Because coconut coir is very dusty when it gets dry. I don't think it's a very good substrate by itself. Of course, there's people out there that use this stuff for like ball python and other tropical species. They've had success with it, so I'm not going to completely knock it. However, I think coconut coir really has its designated space with as being a good mixture ingredient to provide in creating tropical soils. And now, like I said before, there's coconut chip. Coconut chips, of course, are one of the most popular beddings for things like ball pythons and boas. Simply because coconut chips are really absorbent, so they do retain humidity very well. And if an animal releases urates or defecates, the coconut really does a good job at absorbing those fluids. Of course, you got to get in there and dispose of it. However, you can just dispose of the coconut around the feces or urates, right? So it's very easy, and this coconut absorbs these the foul-smelling fluids. So it really does put a damper on smell, and it really does. And like I said, coconut chip really does a good job at absorbing humidity, keeping the humidity up in the enclosure. So it's an overall great substrate to use. However, because it's so good at retaining humidity, coconut chip really sometimes has the habit of fostering communities of fungus gnats. Coconut sometimes tends to mold over in small quantities, even though coconut chips are pretty resistant towards mold. Sometimes they do mold up and they produce fungus gnats, and fungus gnats are not fun, so they sometimes do that. That's why sometimes people go off of coconut chip and use only paper towel for a time to purge out all the fungus gnats, and then switch back to coconut chip. Coconut chip, I think overall, in my case, is one of the best substrates. However, if I'm trying to get a tropical mix going, I would prefer coconut coir, cypress mulch, sand, and sphagnum moss or peat moss, something along those lines, and that will give you a really nice tropical mix. Right? So these are just some of the common substrates. Of course, there's different types of sand. People like to use like play sand, pool sand. There's different types of color of sands. Like there's some very nice dark red sands that are native to certain places for certain geckos, like the ciliaris, Strophis ciliaris. So it really it depends on you, right? Some people really don't want to mess around with the substrate too much because they foster microbes, or they foster these nuisance pest insects, and so they just stick with paper towels, and that's perfectly okay. You just got to be on top of the paper towel, make sure that it's properly cleaned, replaced on a frequent basis as part of your husbandry, and that basically sums it up, right? Now, if you have another type of substrate or a particular substrate mix that you would prefer for certain animals, leave them down below in the comments. It's always nice to have, a fountain of information. And as always, thanks guys for coming by and looking at my video. If you like the video, go down, like, subscribe, leave a comment, maybe on a suggestion for the next video. And as always, guys, thanks for coming by and checking out my video and listening to me talk. Alright guys, I'll see you guys in the next vid.